He rescued an alien woman. Then she returned with his child. The storm on Ganymede's horizon carved across the sky like an open wound, thick bands of violet lightning arcing through towering methane clouds. Sergeant Eli Voss adjusted his visor settings, his exosuit working overtime to compensate for the pressure shifts as the tempest approached. The distress beacon he'd intercepted an hour earlier was barely a whisper in the static, almost a ghost signal, yet too precise to dismiss as interference. Command hadn't authorized any rescue operations in this sector, but then again, Command didn't know that Eli had been the one to receive the transmission directly. His conscience wouldn't let him ignore a soul in distress regardless of protocol. His boots crunched rhythmically over the frozen terrain until the silhouette emerged from the ice, a downed vessel, sleek and obsidian, its elegant form fractured at the center like a broken jewel, the insignia etched into its side, a looping star spiral, identified it immediately as Nalari. The peaceful, isolationist species rarely ventured beyond their home systems, which made finding one this deep in Sol sector all the more puzzling. Eli raised his rifle as he approached the shattered hull, caution warring with compassion. The interior glowed with an eerie luminescence, revealing a chaos of jagged wires, acrid smoke, and movement. A figure stumbled from the wreckage, slender and graceful even in distress, wrapped in a torn silver biosuit. She collapsed face first, into the snow, clutching something precious against her chest. Sprinting forward, Eli carefully turned her over. The woman's bioluminescent skin shimmered beneath her cracked helmet like starlight on water. Her lips had turned blue from the cold, her breathing shallow and labored. When her violet eyes fluttered open, they widened with primal fear. She bared her teeth, not in aggression, but in the desperate exhaustion of a cornered animal protecting her young. "You're safe," Eli said, lowering his weapon and speaking in the calmest tone he could manage. "Human rescue. I'm not here to hurt you." Her gaze flicked downward, revealing the bundle in her arms, a child or what appeared to be one. The small being had the same shimmering skin as its mother, curled tight in peaceful sleep despite the chaos surrounding them. Eli's chest tightened with unexpected emotion. A mother and child, alone on this hostile moon. The woman whispered something, in her native tongue, the musical tones and soft glottal stops of Nalari creating a melody even in desperation. Eli didn't understand the words, but the universal language of a mother's plea needed no translation. The storm was bearing down on them with increasing fury. Without hesitation, Eli triggered his emergency beacon, gathered both mother and child into his arms and hoisted them into his evacuation sled. As the wind screamed around them and he raced back toward the outpost, he remained unaware that this single moment of compassion would reshape his entire future in ways he could never have imagined. The medical bay of Outpost 9 was barely equipped to handle human injuries, let alone the complex physiology of an alien species. But Eli did everything within his power, working alongside the station's AI to identify biological compatibility markers and administer safe stabilizing medications. The child, whom the Nalari woman referred to as Sira, appeared healthy, but remained frightened, her large eyes darting between Eli and her mother with wariness. Her mother, as Eli later learned, was named Valera. She had suffered significant internal trauma and a fractured spine in the crash. She demonstrates remarkable resilience, the AI noted during one of its diagnostic reports, but she requires extended care and recovery time. Protocol suggests contacting her people immediately. That's when Eli encountered an insurmountable obstacle. Valera's homeworld had sealed its borders months earlier following a bitter diplomatic fallout with the Interstellar Coalition. All communication channels were closed and no ambassador responded to his repeated attempts at contact. They were essentially stranded together. Eli didn't sleep much during those initial weeks. He found himself checking Valera's vital signs every hour, responding to Sira's cries in the middle of the night and speaking softly to them both even when he wasn't certain they understood his words. There was something about their vulnerability that awakened a protective instinct he didn't know he possessed. Gradually, Valera began responding, not just physically, but emotionally. Her wounds slowly healed, and she progressed from lying motionless, to sitting up, then eventually walking short distances around the medical bay. One evening, as the pale light of Jupiter filtered through the observation window, Valera stood beside him in comfortable silence. She extended her slender hand, her fingers brushing against his in what he later realized was a traditional Nalari gesture of deep trust and gratitude. "You saved me," she said, her accent thick but beautiful, each word carefully chosen. "And her." Eli blinked in surprise. It was the first time she had spoken English. "I wasn't going to leave you out there," he replied simply. She nodded slowly, tears forming in her luminous eyes. "Most would have. You didn't." As life at the outpost settled into an unexpected rhythm, Eli began teaching Valera Earth Standard, while she reciprocated by sharing snippets of her melodious language. Sira grew with remarkable speed. Nalari children matured at twice the rate of humans, and she began clinging to Eli, mimicking his speech patterns and mannerisms. One day, she called him Da'el, a blend of the human word dad and the Nalari term for protector. The sound stopped Eli in his tracks. "I'm not her father," he said to Valera afterward, laughing nervously at the unexpected surge of emotion the word had triggered. Valera looked at him with soft, serious eyes that seemed to see straight through, to his soul. "You are more her father than the one who made her." He didn't ask what she meant. Deep down, he didn't need to. The truth was already taking root in his heart. The transformation happened gradually, so subtly that Eli barely noticed until it had completely reshaped his daily existence. Sira's presence became the rhythm that governed his days, her delighted laughter when he made faces during meals, her tiny hand slipping into his when they walked through the outpost corridors, her sleepy murmur of Da'el when nightmares woke her in the early hours. Valera watched these interactions with growing warmth, her initial wariness melting into something deeper and more complex. She began sharing stories of Nalari culture during their evening language lessons, describing the crystalline cities of her homeworld and the philosophical traditions that guided her people. In return, Eli found himself opening up about his own past, the loneliness of military life, the distant relationships with his own family back on Earth, the hollow feeling that had driven him to accept increasingly remote assignments. On Nalari, Valera explained one evening as they sat in the observation lounge, "We believe that family is not determined by blood alone, but by choice and commitment. The bonds we forge through love and sacrifice are often stronger than those we inherit." Sira had fallen asleep against Eli's shoulder, her small frame radiating warmth through her biosuit. As he gently adjusted his position to make her more comfortable, he realized that somewhere along the way the child had become as essential to him as breathing. "She dreams of you now," Valera said softly, her voice carrying a note of something Eli couldn't quite identify. "She calls for Da'el when she sleeps." The weight of responsibility and affection settled around his shoulders like a familiar cloak. He had entered this situation as a rescuer, but increasingly he wondered who was actually saving whom. Their peaceful routine was shattered without warning, when proximity alarms announced the arrival of an unscheduled vessel. A coalition patrol ship materialized in the outpost sensor range, and Eli's blood ran cold. He greeted the boarding party at the hangar with a stern expression, and his sidearm prominently displayed. "Sergeant Voss," the lead officer announced, his tone bureaucratically cold. "We received a tracking ping from this station. Intelligence indicates you're harboring an alien refugee." "She crash-landed," Eli replied evenly. "I saved her and her child. She's Nalari, a peaceful species." The officer's expression remained unchanged. "She's an unauthorized alien presence in Coalition space. Orders are orders. They'll be taken into custody for processing." At that moment, Valera emerged from the corridors with Sira clinging to her side. The child immediately hid behind her mother's legs, peeking at the uniformed strangers with frightened eyes that reminded Eli of a cornered animal. Without conscious thought, Eli stepped between the soldiers and his makeshift family. "You'll have to go through me." The officer's eyes narrowed dangerously. "You'd risk your entire career for them?" Eli didn't hesitate, didn't blink, didn't waver. "For her, I'd risk a hell of a lot more than that." The silence stretched taut between them. heavy with unspoken threats and possibilities. Then, against all odds and expectations, the officer gave a stiff nod of something that might have been respect. "We were never here, Sergeant. Our logs will show a routine patrol with no unusual findings." They departed as abruptly as they had arrived, leaving Eli's hands shaking with adrenaline and the realization of what he had just risked, and what he had been willing to sacrifice. The encounter with the Coalition patrol left an indelible mark on all 3 residents of Outpost 9. In the days that followed, Eli found himself constantly checking the sensor arrays, his nerves stretched taut with the expectation of another, unwelcome visit. But more troubling than his own anxiety was the change he observed in Valera and Sierra. The child, who had been blossoming into a confident, curious little being, now startled at unexpected sounds and refused to venture far from either Eli or her mother. Valera, meanwhile, had retreated into herself, speaking less frequently and spending long hours staring out at the frozen landscape with an expression of deep contemplation. "You're thinking about leaving," Eli said one evening, finding her in the observation deck after Sierra had fallen asleep. Valera didn't deny it. "We bring danger to you. Today they chose to look away, but next time—" She shook her head, her bioluminescent skin dimming with distress. "I cannot be the reason you lose everything you've worked for. What if everything I've worked for doesn't matter anymore?" The words surprised Eli even as he spoke them. "What if what I've found here is worth more than a career I never really wanted in the first place?" She turned to look at him, her violet eyes searching his face for sincerity. "You would give up your whole life? Your world?" "I'd give up a lonely existence for a real life," he replied. "There's a difference." Before she could respond, her personal communicator, silent for so many months, suddenly chimed with an incoming transmission. They both stared at the device in shock before Valera activated it with trembling fingers. The message was brief, formal, and delivered in the musical tones of High Nalari. "Your situation has been monitored. The Council extends cautious gratitude for the humans' intervention. Arrangements for repatriation are being prepared." Eli's heart sank even as he forced himself to smile. This was what they had been waiting for. Valera's people finally reaching out, offering to bring her and Sierra home to safety. It was the right thing, the logical thing, the best possible outcome for both mother and child. So why did it feel like his world was ending? "When?" he asked, his voice carefully neutral. 3 days, Valera replied, her own tone hollow. "A diplomatic courier will arrive to escort us." Those 3 days passed in a blur of preparations and careful conversations around the edges of what neither of them seemed willing to say directly. Eli helped them pack their few possessions, organized their travel documents, and made sure Sierra's favorite foods were included in their supplies. He maintained a cheerful facade for the child's sake, but inside he felt as though he were methodically dismantling his own happiness. On the final morning, as they stood together on the shuttle pad waiting for the Nalari vessel to arrive, Sierra suddenly broke away from her mother and threw her small arms around Eli's waist. "Don't want to go without Dael," she declared, her young voice fierce with determination. "Dael comes too." Valera knelt beside her daughter, speaking softly in Nalari, explaining concepts of duty and belonging that the child's heart refused to accept. When she stood again, her own composure was visibly cracking. "She needs you," Valera said quietly, her words almost lost in the wind. "So do I." The admission hung between them like a bridge waiting to be crossed, and Eli realized that some choices could change not just a life but an entire destiny. The Nalari courier ship descended through Ganymede's thin atmosphere with the graceful silence characteristic of their advanced technology. As it settled onto the landing pad, its hull shimmering with the same bioluminescent patterns that marked Valera's skin, Eli felt the weight of an impossible decision pressing down on him. The ship's airlock opened with a soft hiss, and 2 figures emerged, tall, elegant beings wearing formal diplomatic attire. They approached with measured steps, their movements carrying the calculated precision of individuals accustomed to complex negotiations. "Valera Casaran," The lead diplomat addressed her using what Eli assumed was her full name, speaking in rapid Nalari. The conversation that followed was too quick and complex for him to follow, but he caught enough familiar words to understand they were discussing travel arrangements, security protocols, and the political implications of the rescue. Throughout the exchange, Sira remained pressed against Eli's side, her small hand gripping his with surprising strength. She seemed to understand, with the intuitive wisdom of children, that these strangers represented a fundamental change to the only life she had known for months. "Dial," she whispered, looking up at him with eyes that held far too much understanding for someone so young. "Come home with us?" Before Eli could respond, one of the diplomats addressed him directly, in accented but fluent English. "Sergeant Voss, the council acknowledges your service to our people. Such kindness toward strangers is rare in these times." "I did what anyone should have done," Eli replied, though they all knew that wasn't true. "Perhaps," the diplomat conceded. "Nevertheless, your actions have created a situation that requires delicate handling. The child has formed attachments that complicate standard repatriation procedures." Valera stepped forward, her posture reflecting the dignified bearing of her people even as her voice trembled with emotion. "I formally request that Sergeant Voss be granted sanctuary on Nalari as a protected family unit guardian." The silence that followed was profound. Eli stared at her, hardly daring to believe what he had heard. "That is highly irregular," the second diplomat said. "Humans are not typically granted long-term residence on Nalari worlds." "These are not typical circumstances," Valera replied firmly. "This human saved not only my life but that of my child. He has cared for us when we had no one else. In the traditions of our people, he has earned the right to claim family bond if he chooses." The diplomats exchanged glances, communicating in the subtle ways of their species. Finally, the lead negotiator nodded slowly. "The council will need to deliberate, but precedent exists for exceptional cases." All eyes turned to Eli. His entire life had been built around following orders, maintaining protocols, and serving within established hierarchical structures. The military had given him purpose, direction, and identity. Leaving it all behind for an uncertain future on an alien world should have been unthinkable. But as he looked down at Sira's hopeful face and met Valera's eyes that held not just affection but a deep, abiding love that he had never expected to find, the choice became crystal clear. "I don't know anything about your world," he said slowly. "I don't know your customs, your laws, or even your language beyond a few basic phrases." Valera's expression began to fall, but he quickly continued. "But I know that whatever I've been searching for my whole life, I found it here with both of you. If you'll have me, if your people will accept me, then yes. I want to come home with you." Sira's delighted squeal could probably be heard across the outpost, and even the stoic diplomats seemed moved by the child's unrestrained joy. As Valera reached for his hand, her own eyes bright with tears, Eli realized that sometimes the most important missions were the ones nobody ever ordered you to undertake. 5 years later, Eli stood on the crystalline balcony of their home in Varatan, watching the twin suns of the Nalari system paint the sky in shades of gold and amber. The city stretched out below them, its organic architecture flowing like frozen music between the natural crystal formations that gave the settlement its name. The sound of laughter drew his attention to the garden terraces below, where Nalari and human children played together, a sight that would have been impossible just a few years earlier. The integration hadn't been easy. There had been political tensions, cultural misunderstandings, and moments when Eli wondered if he had made a terrible mistake. But time and patience had worked their quiet magic. His small family had become a bridge between two species, proof that understanding and love could transcend the barriers of biology and culture. Other humans had followed, scientists, artists, diplomats, creating a small but thriving community that enriched both civilizations. "Regrets?" Valera asked, settling beside him on the smooth stone bench they had carved together during their second year on Nalari. Her English had become flawless, though she still preferred the musical cadences of her native tongue when they were alone. "Never," Eli replied, intertwining their fingers in a gesture that had become as natural as breathing. "Though I never could have imagined this future when I first picked up that distress signal. It came to pass because you made one choice," she said softly. "To save a life, to love without conditions, to risk everything for something better." Movement caught their attention as Sierra came bounding up the garden path, her adolescent features showing the elegant bone structure she had inherited from her mother. At 12, she moved with the unconscious grace of her people but spoke with the directness she had learned from Eli. "Da'el," she called, using the name that had evolved from her childhood pronunciation into a formal title of respect and affection. "I made the wind dance at school today. Master Kelvin says I have natural talent for atmospheric manipulation." Eli lifted her into his arms, marveling as always at how light and strong she felt, like holding concentrated starlight. "Show me," he said, and she laughed with pure joy as she demonstrated her newfound ability, making small whirlwinds spiral between her fingers. As the sun set and the first stars appeared in the alien sky, the three of them sat together in comfortable silence. Eli thought about the soldier he had been, dutiful, isolated, following orders without question. That man seemed like a stranger now, someone from another lifetime. "You saved us once," Valera murmured, echoing his thoughts as she often did. "But we have saved each other every day since." Sierra curled against his shoulder, her breathing gradually slowing as sleep claimed her. In the distance, the lights of Varatan twinkled like earthbound constellations, and Eli knew with absolute certainty that he was exactly where he belonged. He had rescued an alien woman and her child from a frozen moon, but in doing so, he had discovered something far more precious. A family that transcended species, a love that conquered fear, and a home that existed not in any particular place, but in the bonds they had chosen to forge together among the stars.